You may have heard all the buzz about a cheating scandal at the SCGCon Riftbound 10K in Las Vegas this past weekend. I'm going to dive into all the clips, the controversy, what it means, and how to protect yourself and your tournaments. Without further ado, let's get into it. First off, a big shout out to Turn 'em Sideways, who streamed the whole event. It was a long, grueling event. They didn't even finish the final matches because it was so late. The venue's literally being packed up behind them, but they did a great job of bringing us all the footage from the event, and that's where a lot of these clips come from. So just want to give them a shout out because they did an amazing job and they deserve it. All right, here is example one, first game of the day on stream, Savjz versus Kenneth on the Annie. And this is our first example of the free stopper. Kenneth up in the series by one game, scores 3-3. He has just placed down a Darius Trifarian, and he's going to untap two, has both battlefields. Savjz only has this set. So you have to look at the game state here is Kenneth is like, hey, if I hold this round, if I can maintain my board state, I'm going to crush this game. Savjz is like, I have to do something big this turn. Otherwise, my board state's in jeopardy and this game is in jeopardy. And so both of them are very focused on the next form of play. So we're seeing Kenneth untap his two runes. Savjz is going to ready his set and bring in two runes. And we can look at his hand now. And what we see from Savjz is he has Cynthia, he has a Fiora, and then he has a Killing Blade, a Showstopper, and a Challenge. And he's looking at this board and he's going, man, I really have to play something big. I don't really want to play my Hidden Blade onto one of these units and give Annie draw. That's going to give her more gas, and that's going to put me in a bad spot. And so what he's going to smartly do is, knowing that two are up and that's what's represented here, is he's most likely going to expecting a fight or flight, and therefore he's going to Showstopper in, and we'll just let this roll out. So he's going to smartly Showstopper, and the reason he's Showstoppering is because if you fight or flight the setback, then the set can still exhaust and move back in. He's still going to be readied when the Showstopper goes off. Showstopper also rebuffs set, so he's now at a 9 power coming into this. And you can see him pay the 1, and he places the buff on and he pushes in. I think Savjz, looking at this, is the main issue is he's so focused on the play and how big this turn has to be. I think after he pays for this Showstopper, he is moving past the play. He's not remembering the cost. And because he's not remembering the cost, you end up in a situation like this with the opponent, where the opponent at this point could say, hey, hold up, you didn't pay for your full costs. However, his opponent is immediately ready to fight or flight. And so Kenneth jumps in here, and now the conversation is all about what is happening at this battlefield, who's being fight or flighted. Kenneth probably not going to make an optimal decision here, because he's going to kind of play into the Showstopper strength of pushing set back when set is just, he's going to go in there. Now, the upside is if he pushes him back and set commits and you still have Darius alive, you can push back in and kind of push that set back. Although he's going to have a buff, he's going to be able to sack runes, maintain. But a lot of the game against set is getting him to choke himself out on his own resources. But if you don't fight or flight him back, he goes on there, he takes the thing, he can still do everything he wants to do this turn, and then he can move himself back and you have no kind of response. The set doesn't mind holding here, doesn't really care if he holds here or not. He really just wants to have a big enough turn to kind of clear out these battlefields. Now, the fight or flight is going to come through and it's going to push back the set. But again, both players are not focused anymore on paying for cost of abilities and that kind of thing. And he's going to buff and push back in, because if now he comes in at a 12, he's going to get that buff marker back when he pushes back in. And he has a huge unit here. It's going to heal up. And then we are going to see that as this happens, he is then going to do the challenge, and he's going to remove that backline threat of Darius Trifarian. So he's going to give up the hold point on the other end, but at the same time, he removed the biggest threat. And now is where Kenneth is like, hey, like, are the runes correct? Maybe. I'm not sure, because we can't really hear what they're saying, because the casters were really only what was happening, was going over the cast. But now at this point, it's so late, and when neither player can really remember, I think at this point is where one or both players should have called the judge, or did something to kind of resolve the state and make sure that it's good. Look at the trash and be like, hey, how many runes did you have at the beginning? You had 6. You played 2 cards that cost power. You should be at 4 runes now at this point. And you can resolve it that way. So as a player, if you're in Kenneth's position, don't be afraid to call a judge here if this happens. Don't be afraid to kind of try to look through the trash so that both of you can come to agreement of what the actual state is. But also, when someone plays any card with a power cost in Riftbound, because of how new the game is, and even if it's not, I actually think that if it's a big tournament like this with cash on the line, you and no judges at the table, you got to protect yourself. And I think you should always make sure that your opponent is paying their cost before you do anything, before you react to anything. If someone pays for something, make sure they pay all their costs. Don't let them angle shoot you, cheat you. If they are trying to cheat you or be malevolent, you don't know. In this case, Savjz, I think that literally he was so focused on making his move, he pushed in. Kenneth responded really quickly, and both of their brains had went far past paying the costs. Also, for what it's worth for anyone in this game, what eventually does happen is Kenneth actually gets this Vi up and goes in for a big swing onto this board. And when she does, the funny part about all of this is that they actually do the math wrong when Vi goes in. So Vi is going to go in, and Vi is at 12 plus 3, so it's 15. And then you have Cythria at 2. You have a 7 here, so 2, 7, that's 9. And then you have 5, and that would be a 14. Except when Fiora's mighty, she's actually a 6, which would be a 15, which means they would both trade and the game would continue. Kenneth wouldn't have got to capture this and own both battlefields. So even in this case, Savjz made a math mistake and loses the game basically off of it. So as much as you might think someone's angle shooting or trying to get one over, this is another example where Savjz makes a mistake that's not in his favor, and he actually loses this match to the Annie in the end. All right, so here's example number 2. As you can see, Carmen, who's played a great series against Savjz. This is top 16. Winner goes to the top 8 cut, 6-5. Savjz is in a commanding position, just had a blowout, unyielding against in the Cathian Rain, which Cathian Rain into set is just a rough card to play in general. I think you have to switch it up, but we see the Showstopper come in. Again, it's paid for. Set moves in, gets the kill. The funny part is like, yes, would have had the buff, so it was actually 5-4 there, but doesn't even go through that procedure when in time. But Carbon knows, good sport, blocks it out. But you can see again, the Showstopper has not been paid for. The Showstopper really only is getting played here so they can get a buff up right here, the Glory Seeker. And yeah, so that's pretty much going to be game, as the holds are both so big that it'll be tough for Carmen to retake either one of these, especially with a hidden card on the other one. And Carmen's just going to scoop. But in this instance right here, like not paying for the power cost, like really wouldn't have affected anything. You're just missing a single order rune. And if we're playing around an unyielding play, like there was another unyielding in the deck for Savjz or something like that, he still has an orange rune, you still have one up. Like really, like nothing was affected by not paying this cost, but it does show a consistency in the fact that this guy is colorblind maybe to the power cost on this card. And I think a lot of it is because this is the killer moment where you're going in for the win and both players just kind of moving and looking past it. Carmen, as good a player as she has been in this tournament, in this event, doesn't see it either. And so that's just what it is. Again, protect yourselves, everybody. And then we're going to move on to our third and final and the most egregious example of this on camera. All right, and here we are for our final and most egregious example and the most game warping play of kind of the series and what plays out in this game, because it's a play that really shouldn't make the next thing possible. And I think that Savjz probably loses this game and doesn't make it to top 16 if he loses this game, because this game is for all the marvels between Savjz and Jacob. Jacob's up 1 game in this series. It's 1-1. Savjz just lost on the crackback here from the Yordle and a Cleave. He has 6 runes open, so he is going to bring out the Set Brawler, which will cost him 5 and an orange rune. You can see the recycle comes in, and there is the Set Brawler, and then there's the Showstopper, which should be paid 1 for, and the power cost paid 1 for. Retreat gets played in. Yordle comes back to hand. Cost is still not paid though. Cost is going on. There should not be a rune open, and that body rune should not be there at all. Buff comes in, process gets followed. No one is really paying attention to the fact that this rune shouldn't even not only be exhausted, but it should be recycled now at this point, or at least an order rune could have been recycled in this place, but he should be tapped out right now. And so what's going to happen here from Jacob is going to respond to this set. He's like, all right, I got to get this off the board. I got to try to solve this. And let's see what he decides to do. Kaisa is going to come off from the champion zone, going to go in accelerated, and is going to get the cleave treatment. Huge play right here. That's going to take down the set. So therefore, Savjz is going to right here is going to sacrifice a rune here to save his set. However, he shouldn't have a rune open. And right now, Jacob has a great play. He's mapped this out great. The falling star comes in. That should be a dead set brawler. 100% that set brawler is gone. It's dead. It's done. But no, the magical unyielding comes out from the top ropes that shouldn't even have happened, shouldn't even existed. And the rune finally gets gotten rid of. And we just play on. And this is just tragic and heartbreaking for Jacob, because Jacob, that play was a great play, a great Kaisa play, one of the things that makes Kaisa dangerous. And this set brawler should be out. It should be gone. And Savjz should have to play from a lot tougher position where he probably doesn't have something that accelerates back out and challenges this. And Jacob's going to gain the point tempo on following turns. And he has, he has access to a Cathian Rain now if there's not another unyielding, because the unyielding's been used. But that's a big play. Getting rid of, making Set spend a bunch of runes and getting rid of his big sets is a big part of combating Set and getting rid of his tempo and his strengths. And so it's a real bummer for Jacob, because Jacob could have easily taken the series had the completely free stopper not existed. So this is just egregious from Savjz, and I know he feels bad about it. He's apologized for it, but that's just the most egregious example of what happened. And we can move on from here and we can talk about things as we go on. Now, after the event, Savjz did respond. First he thought that maybe this didn't happen, or maybe there was a few specific instances where it happened. But as more clips came out, he actually deleted that post, realizing that the play pattern was much bigger than he thought. And a lot of this stuff adds up to someone that I think really just in the heat of the moment for whatever he was doing was misplaying a specific card or misplaying sequences, and he was rushing to do actions. And as I point out in some of those clips, that really does seem to be what happened. Is something would pull focus or distraction. He'd be really focused on a big turn or swing or play. And that is where things would kind of get lost in translation. Sometimes it mattered and like really big, and sometimes it didn't matter at all. And to his credit, he did apologize in this post, talking about it, mentioning there were 5 instances where he believed it happened on stream. There was the 3 that I ran through. There were probably others. And the other thing to really think about, though, is if you were doing this play pattern on stream, and these are the instances we have, you probably did it throughout the tournament more often than that. And I think overall, one of the things to take away from this tournament in general was a lot of the players are pretty new to the game, and there's so many mistakes that were happening. There was one other streamed game where the person was trying to use Hexray at reaction speed when it was action speed. Like there's a lot, and it just played on. And so it starts a larger conversation, but at least to Savjz's credit, I take him at least at face value. Now, he's made mistakes in other games, apparently in Lorcana, drawing an extra card. And I think that any of us that have actually played a TCG are pretty aware that in these instances, you make mistakes sometimes, like you're going to make a play error mistake. Not all of us are on stream for it to get caught. But I think it's more important that even if a player like this, a player that plays a lot of this game online and maybe has some of the stuff shortcutted for him, I think that number one, make sure that you play in person so that you do the correct procedures to pay the cost for your spells and all that kind of stuff. And the other piece of that is also watch your opponents. Make sure that they're paying their costs when it's their turn and they have focus and they're going to play something. Don't be stuck in your head with your immediate reactions. Make sure that they're paying their thing and then go on to what you want to do. And in this, they talk about, he apologizes to Jacob. I think that it was a huge swing in the game. I don't think it was minor. Yes, it was early in the game, so it could have played out differently, but losing the set at that point, the reverse, like saving it, was a huge swing, and not acknowledging that I think is pretty unfair. So yes, I think that not paying the cost and not recycling is a pretty big blunder that should be apologized for. And I do agree that some of the times had no bearing. However, even then, what I would say is like don't don't try to wash away that they had no bearing. Just apologize and be like, "Hey, I messed up. I played. This is how I'm going to do better." And he does go through that, and he says, he talks to the instances, and he says, "I'm truly sorry to everyone disappointed in my sloppy play, and especially sorry to Jacob, who potentially would have won that game. I'm not going to make excuses for whatever reason. I had a pattern where I occasionally started executing the particular card's actions before paying for it. I assume I was so focused on thinking about the strategy of the card that caused me to forget. I wasn't aware of any of the uncorrected spots, as I would have corrected them on the spot if I had noticed. I didn't have time to watch between rounds, and nobody was mentioning it to me. I only learned about this after I made top four. That's when I saw a clip with the one versus Jacob that went unnoticed and benefited me. I wrote the previous explanation in an Uber, still not knowing of any other instances. I'm really sorry. My advice for anyone playing: pay the mana and recycle costs before doing anything else." And that is the big takeaway. It's on you to make sure that you pay all your costs and you do the correct procedure. Because if you get called in a tournament and you get too many warnings, like Savjz, like probably would like get game losses or DQ'd with how many times it happened, like intentional or not, right? But like unless you call a judge, then you're going to be in a scenario like this where you could get got. And I think that is like one of the main takeaways. On the flip side of things, on the turn sideways side of things, a lot of people brought up that turn them sideways should have called judges. How did the casters not notice this? First off, as someone that has been a shoutcaster and a tournament organizer, I have a pretty good view on these things. As a shoutcaster, there are a lot of things you are taking in the game. You are not looking at it purely from a judging standpoint. The casters, to their credit, throughout the event, did catch many errors by the players. However, they were pretty much instructed not to call judges. And part of that is that they are not part of the major organization. Their tables are not featured tables at a Riot event. This is really just tables that are being streamed, but they count as any other table. So it's still on the players to call judges. And in this, Anzid goes through the kind of his reasoning for why they didn't call judges or have judges at the tables. And a lot of it comes down to cost, which makes a lot of sense. Policy, just kind of giving dedicated judges to tables versus all the other tables throughout the event not having judges. It kind of creates this imbalance of how the rules are being enforced. And you want to create an environment where it is everyone's under the same rules, everyone has the same opportunity to call judges or whatever. And it's not that players that are on stream, which could be because of relationships that they have with Turn Sideways or because they're popular streamer, influencer, whatever, they get to play at the tables with lots of judging and all that kind of stuff. And everyone else doesn't get that same treatment. I think that that is a valid way to look at things. And when you look at competitive integrity, part of it is like, hey, like I want to make sure that for everyone it is fair as possible and no one's getting special treatment or the like. Now, on the flip side of things, the argument against this is if you are, let's say, Riot, or you are a fan of Riftbound, you want to see the best product presented to people that are going to view the game. And if what comes out of your big player tournament, your biggest player tournament of the weekend is like, hey, like there's a bunch of people that no one knows how to play, there's people cheating on stream and no one's doing anything about it, and that kind of thing, that is a bad look for Riot's game. It's a bad look for people that tune in. They're like, oh wow, like, I don't know if I want to play this or go to a tournament because I'm just going to get cheated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that it's important to balance both. Now, I think that it's perfectly reasonable for Turn 'Em Sideways, who probably spent a lot of money, is probably losing money to go to this event and get this kind of, and run it as well as they did. Like their booth looked amazing. They had a lot of stuff invested to pay another $1,000 or whatever plus to have judges sit in, or, people have said like, why don't you get volunteer judges? And sure, they might volunteer, but you're looking for people that are local or that want to pay for their own hotel and flights and all that kind of stuff to get there and then spend 14 plus hours at this table judging games, like, and they have to be reliable. Like, I think it's reasonable that if someone's going to do a job, you pay them if you're going to have them do the job, and you pick people that are reliable. And who knows if the volunteer's reliable? There's like so many steps to this that, like, what if you go through all that and the judge still misses it, right? And then the SCGCon is then held accountable for your volunteer judge or whatever. So there's a lot of things to this that I think it gets messy, and I think that it's not on Turn 'Em Sideways that this necessarily happened. However, I think it's a good conversation to have for the community, and good thought-provoking thing for Turn 'Em Sideways is like, hey, if we have crew, we want to give the casters breaks, all this kind of stuff, but where might we be able to squeeze in some ability to have judges at the tables, or can we actually afford to budget this in or get sponsors that can help us have that so we can have a better product and better presented product? because it's all ways in. Like I have to imagine a lot of Turn 'em Sideways being at this event, doing this event is one, it's cool. You get to flex your muscles and like your streaming and your production quality and all that stuff is really good. But you're also trying to build a partnership with Riot. And so I think both of these go kind of like hand in hand of like part of that is presenting the good product is making sure that it is presented well, and part of that presentation is making sure that the game is presented in the best way possible, which is not just overlays and graphics, but also making sure that the rules are adhered to and that you don't have stories like this coming out of an event. And again, I don't really put this blame on Turn 'em Sideways. I don't think that it's their fault that this happened or that a player made so many mistakes or the players made so many mistakes. I think it's completely reasonable, everything that Anson said here. I just think that it's also valid to basically think a step ahead for the future and be like, hey, can we squeeze in the budget? Can we, convince Padocast to come out there and judge for us? I'll go do it. I would have flown myself to Vegas to go judge a table for you guys. But again, I think that the question is a fair question for the community. But Turn 'em Sideways is also its own business. It's not this multi-million-dollar conglomerate. It's a bunch of guys that are really passionate and putting on a really great show, and we are lucky that they were able to go out and do this for us, including Blevins flying in from another country. Like, I don't think people understand like how much investment it was from them to basically probably lose money on this event to stream and do it. So I like, big shout out to them. We need people like that in the community. So Anzid, Turn 'em Sideways crew, like a million thumbs up for me on what you did and in the effort you did of like bringing us that event in such an awesome way. To wrap all of this up, Savjz made a lot of mistakes. One of them was pretty critical, probably got him into the top 16 cut. I think that we don't know how many other times it happened during the event. He's apologized. He said he's going to do better. The reality is he's going to have to live with the fact that people remember things. Like people remember the Lorcana. Like there was another guy that came up that was playing his runes all crazy, was being weird, and he was like, there's stories about him cheating once by playing 2 lands in a turn. Like there's all this lore of once you make mistakes like this on stream, like that follows you. And so Savjz is going to have people like Free Stopper is going to be talked about continuously. Every event he's going to go to, he's going to be hawked on for making sure that he's paying his power costs. And that's probably a good thing for him since he admittedly was playing sloppily or was not doing the correct procedure. So this is going to help hold him accountable at future events. And it's just a thing that he's going to have to pay for, the fact that he didn't play the game completely smoothly. Now, everybody else wasn't under necessarily the same type of scrutiny, but when you're a popular figure, that's a thing that comes with it. But the fact that he took responsibility, I think is great. Turn 'em Sideways, completely understandable that there weren't table judges there that were on everything. Really, it is on the players to make the call to the judge. And I think that we all, if you go to a major tournament, even if you're locals, it's just a good way to build that muscle. Is just make sure that you yourself are paying all your costs before you move on with your play, and that you also are making sure your opponents are paying all their costs before they continue with theirs. One thing that I personally like to do when I am playing is I will make a mental note. In general, you want to, on your turn, you want to be like, okay, how +2 runes, how many runes is my opponent going to have on next turn? What are their potential plays into me based on what I'm doing on my turn? These are all things you should be thinking about. But then on their turn, you should mark down, if you have a notepad or whatever, if you have a bad memory, you can go and be like, hey, 10 runes or 5 runes or whatever. And that way, when the turn is wrapping up or things are progressing and they pay stuff with power, you actually have a record where you can be like, okay, he had 6 runes. He spent 2 power. He should have 4 runes left. And if you look down and you see 5 runes, then you can be like, oh, hey, you didn't pay for a power cost, judge, or like whatever you need to do to correct the situation and make sure that there's a track record of it. So that way, when it happens to other players, if it does come up throughout the tournament, then it will be corrected and you can track this stuff. But for a lot of players that get into these play habits, you as a player, even as good and as much as Savjz plays, like if he has the wrong play pattern and it never gets corrected, if he doesn't know, then it's hard, he's not going to make the corrections and it's going to spread through the tournament, and then it's going to devalue the results of that tournament. And I think in these tournaments, I think there is always a grain of salt that's going to have to be taken because game is new for the West, and the level of play for players is going to be very volatile no matter what the deck strength is. And also that people might just be playing rules improperly. Like I said, trying to play things at reaction speed when they're action speed, not resolving change, shortcutting stuff, not paying costs, like all this kind of stuff. you have to be hyper vigilant on in a tournament if you want to make sure that you are not getting cheated and you are not cheating anyone else. Because the last thing you want to do is be making a mistake, not know about it, and then now you have uh, a nickname follow you with free stopper. So all this to say, I think that Savjz has learned a great lesson from this event. I think he actually is sorry for how things played out, how it happened. This is gotta suck for him. It sucks for his opponents that didn't get to progress the tournament potentially because of it. But overall, again, good lesson for everyone in this tournament. And shout out to Tournament Savjz again for putting and SCGCon for putting on an awesome event and all the events this weekend. If you want to hear my takes on and recaps of those, I have an awesome video coming out about set and some of the other stuff to follow this video. But I think all of us need to take a step back. We need to chill a little bit and be thankful that we have awesome production crews like Turn Sideways, and we have so much hype and presence in these tournaments in the very early days of this game. This is all great signs. And heading into Houston, you guarantee there will be judges at those tables. There'll be a lot of judges, and protect yourself if you are going. I'm going to be hyper vigilant myself, building that muscle in my locals. And without further ado, remember, you're going to be amazing today because you are amazing. And I'll catch you next episode.